Our drama begins with Jang, the CEO of a famous cleaning company. He has a severe phobia of germs, making him extremely sensitive to any kind of dirt. Everything he owns is always sanitized, and he carries alcohol wipes 24/7. His best friend is a small vacuum cleaner named Joe. Jang is heading to an important conference to present a new service from his company. Meanwhile, we meet Sol, an average girl living with her family. However, unlike Jang, her life is completely chaotic, and she doesn't care much about cleanliness. Her best friend Joe even comments on how bad she smells, telling her that she hasn't changed her clothes in a week. Joe also jokes that no guy would ever be interested in her like this. Sol brushes it off, claiming she doesn't care, but then she catches sight of a guy named Jin, whom she's secretly admired for 3 years. Despite her crush, she hasn't been able to muster the courage to speak to him. Back to Jang. After finishing his meeting, his assistant Jun comes to update him on his schedule. Jun takes care of every detail of Jang's life, even arranging the cleaning staff for his house, and is someone he trusts deeply. Jang is preparing for a blind date with a famous anchor. Being a neat freak, he arrives at the restaurant an hour early to clean everything himself. The anchor arrives, and she's stunning. Jang starts to feel attracted to her because she appears clean. However, when she pulls her hair back, he notices that her ears are dirty. Horrified, Jang screams and abruptly leaves the date. Later that night, Jang's mother visits his apartment, leaving the door open, and confronts him about walking out on the date. She warns him that no woman will ever accept him if he keeps behaving like this, but he doesn't seem to care. As he closes the door, he realizes his vacuum Joe is missing. He suspects it ran away when the door was left open. Fate steps in, as Sol happens to find Joe in a pile of trash. Thinking it looks valuable, she picks it up and puts it in her bag. Surveillance cameras catch her taking Joe. Sol goes home as if nothing happened, but when she walks in, she's startled to see someone coming out of her bathroom. She screams, thinking it's an intruder, and chases the person down. Her father intervenes and tells her that it's Choi, the new tenant living in the apartment above them. The next day, Jang checks the security footage and identifies Sol as the person who took Joe. He distributes flyers in the neighborhood, offering a huge reward for Joe's return. Sol's brother Dahl comes across one of the flyers and recognizes Joe from their house. Dahl comes home feeling excited because he plans to return the vacuum and claim the reward. Meanwhile, Sol's father injures his back and calls her, asking her to cover for him at work so he doesn't lose his job. We find out he works as a cleaner. Despite her reluctance, Sol agrees because their financial situation is bad. She starts collecting trash but feels embarrassed when she realizes Jin is watching her from behind. She finds a horse mask on the ground, puts it on, and starts running away with the garbage cart. Jin and his friends chase after her, and soon a crowd joins in, thinking something important is happening. Even Dahl, who is waiting to meet Yang to return the vacuum, sees the commotion and runs after them. Unfortunately, Sol accidentally crashes into a car, damaging it. She apologizes and leaves a note with her number, offering to compensate for the damage later. However, the car's owner, not letting it slide, pulls off her mask, revealing her face to everyone. The crowd takes pictures of her, and she walks away embarrassed. Dahl is upset about what happened to his sister. The next day, Jun, Jang's assistant, sees him still searching for the vacuum. She tells him it's just a small vacuum cleaner, but Jang reveals that it holds sentimental value. It was a gift from his nanny, who raised him while his mother was always away traveling. The vacuum is the only thing that reminds him of her. Later, Jang calls Sol and they meet. He demands compensation for the car damage, and the amount is way beyond what she can afford. She asks for more time to pay, but Jang recognizes her as the girl who took his vacuum. He accuses her of calling him from an unknown number to return it. Sol checks the number and realizes it's her brother's. She confronts Dahl and hits him for trying to take the reward money behind her back. Meanwhile, Sol gets a call from Joe, inviting her to a party she's been invited to. Sol dresses up and attends, only to be surprised when she sees Jin at the party. She sits next to him and he feels bad about what happened to her, acting very kind and gentle. He asks for her number, and when she gets home, Jin texts her, inviting her to lunch the next day. Sol is overjoyed and agrees to meet. The next day, she goes to see Jin, but he's dealing with an issue at work. A model for a shoot didn't show up, and they need to film. Jin asks Sol to help, and she agrees, stepping in to film a food commercial. Jang sees her during the shoot, but she doesn't notice. Afterwards, Sol is exhausted when she gets home, but Jin texts her again, setting up another meeting. The next day, Sol prepares to return the vacuum and goes to meet Jang first. However, she learns that Jin already has a girlfriend and was only being kind to her out of pity. He was having her do commercials to help with her financial situation, but was also using her to ensure his work ran smoothly. Heartbroken, Seol tells Jin that she had genuine feelings for him and calls herself foolish for believing he could love her. She leaves him behind, walking away. Seol suddenly runs into Jang, who overhears everything. She leaves to change her clothes, hands him the vacuum, and walks away. Afterward, she goes to several job interviews, trying to find a job to help her father, but her lack of experience means she doesn't get hired anywhere. Meanwhile, we see two employees from a company walking together. A girl approaches one of them, Dong, saying she likes him and wants his number, but he declines. As he tries to leave, two guys, Dahl and his friend Sheik, confront him because Sheik has feelings for the girl. Dahl, being skilled in taekwondo, backs his friend up. However, Dong, who is strong, defends himself and beats both of them up, as his friend had already been injured earlier because of them. When Seol returns home, she notices her brother receives frequent visits from girls and is unemployed. Then, she gets a call from the police and finds out her brother is in custody. Jang goes to the police station to release his employees and learns that Dong was the one who beat them up. We then discover that Dong has a criminal record and was hired by Jang because he knows something no one else does. Seol manages to bail out her brother and his friend, and they apologize, promising not to do it again. Meanwhile, it's revealed that Seol's father was fired from his job because of his age. The next day, Yang goes with his mother to celebrate his birthday, where we learn that his grandfather is extremely harsh on him, even mocking his germophobia. When Yang tries to leave, his grandfather throws a fork at him, injuring him. We then discover that his germophobia stems from his childhood trauma with his grandfather, who would often beat him for not staying clean enough. His nanny, who raised him, was the only one who comforted him during those times. Seol later sees her father begging on the streets and realizes he was fired from his job. She goes home determined to land her next job to support her family. She applies for a job at a cleaning company, which turns out to be Jang's company. There, she runs into Shik, and they agree to keep the company's connection a secret between them. Both of them take the fitness tests, and Seol, being in good shape, passes and gets hired. She's shocked when she finds out that Jang is the CEO of the company she's working for. He too is surprised, given how far she is from being clean, but he doesn't fire her on her first day. Seol goes home and proudly tells her family she got a job at a prestigious company, though she doesn't mention that it's a cleaning company. To celebrate the new employees, Jang invites everyone to dinner. Seol tries to mend the relationship between Shik, Dong, and the others, who were at the police station. As the night goes on, Seol gets drunk and ends up sitting in the street, where a group of men start harassing her. Jang, feeling disgusted but compelled to help, puts her in his car and drives her home. When they reach her street, Jin is waiting outside her house and offers to take her home, claiming to be her neighbor. However, Jang knows he's lying and refuses to hand Seol over until her brother arrives to take her. Jang leaves them and drives away. Later that night, Seol sees Jang again and apologizes for all the trouble she caused during the dinner. He brushes it off and leaves. The next day, as Seol works in her cleaning uniform, Jin notices her and teases her, surprised that she's a cleaner. He mocks her, saying there's no way anyone could like someone like her. Hurt, Seol spots Jang nearby and tells Jin with a low voice that Jang is her boyfriend. She asks Jang to play along, but he's disgusted by her. In a moment of desperation, she grabs his hand and touches him, which causes him to faint as he cannot handle physical contact. When Jang regains consciousness, he's furious and orders her to leave. Later, Seol goes home and finds her father, who says he's going to work. She follows him and sees him begging his old boss for his job back. The boss cruelly pushes him to the ground. Seol rushes to her father's side, helps him up, and tells him that she's working now and will support the family just like he did for her when she was growing up. One day, Seol notices someone well-dressed asking for Jang. When Jang comes down, he recognizes the man and invites him up to his apartment. We find out that this man claims to be a psychiatrist, but in reality, he's just a delusional person pretending to be one and treating others. After the patient leaves, Seol asks Jang who that man was, and Jang says he's a psychiatrist helping him. Seol thinks Jang is crazy and treats him like he's losing his mind. Later, Seol tells Jang that she knows a good psychiatrist who might be able to help him with his germophobia. Reluctantly, Jang agrees to seek treatment and takes the doctor's number. That night, Jang calls the psychiatrist, explaining his condition and talking about this new girl, Seol, who's recently come into his life. He admits that he feels somewhat drawn to her. The psychiatrist tells him that this is the first step in his treatment, and that this girl could be the key to his healing by gradually changing him. He advises Jang to keep her in his life as much as possible. The next day, we see Sol in different clothes, wearing a mask and cleaning the whole apartment. It's revealed that this day marks the anniversary of her mother's death, and Sol has a habit of cleaning the house and taking care of herself as a way of coping. She goes to work, and everyone is shocked by how clean and well-dressed she is, especially Jang, who finds himself staring at her for a moment. After snapping out of it, Jang orders everyone to get back to work. The team is sent to clean the home of a man who owns a collection of rare, expensive figurines, and the entire house is under surveillance. One of the figurines was cleaned, but the man was in a hurry and left it on the shelf. As soon as he leaves, the figurine falls and breaks. Unfortunately, Sol walks by carrying a bucket of water, and as she watches a news report about a 6-year-old accident, the same one that killed her mother, she steps on the broken figurine. The owner returns and assumes she broke it. He's furious and hits her in his rage, even grabbing Dong when he tries to intervene. Dong manages to calm the situation, and they all go to the boss, Jang. Jang is angry about the incident, not only because of the broken figurine, but also because it could damage the company's reputation. Jang scolds Sol harshly, accusing her of being distracted by thoughts of men and suggesting that all she wants is a romantic relationship. He kicks her out of his office and tells her not to come back to the company. Sol, feeling devastated, goes to visit her mother's grave and breaks down crying. While there, she notices a juice box, her favorite, left in front of the grave. Curious, she picks it up and starts running, wondering who left it there. It turns out that Choi, someone from her past, had left it. He remembers her, though she doesn't recognize him. That night, Sol sits on the stairs outside her house when Choi, dressed in a suit, comes and sits beside her. He has something in his hands, and when Sol peeks, she sees it's the same juice she loves. Choi tells her that he likes the juice too. Sol tells Jang in a low voice that she was wrongfully blamed and that the client assaulted her. She also mentions that it was the anniversary of her mother's death, and she wasn't in a good mental state that day. Jang realizes he needs to apologize to her. Later, we see Choi walking Sol home when Jang appears, wanting to talk to Sol privately. He apologizes to her, but then suddenly snaps, yelling that she should have told him about the client's assault so he could defend her. He tells her she's not fired and can return to work. The next day, Jang compensates the client by replacing the broken figurine, but the client hints that the incident is over and Jang's involvement should end. However, Jang insists on seeing the surveillance footage from the house to file a lawsuit for the assault. The client, scared, apologizes profusely and agrees to apologize to Sol directly. Sol returns to work, and while cleaning on a high ladder, she suddenly falls. Jang, who's nearby, instinctively rushes to catch her. It's the first time he voluntarily touches someone, and everyone around is shocked that he didn't have a breakdown. Jang starts to believe that what his psychiatrist said might be true. Love could be the cure. He begins to suspect that he might actually be in love with Sol. We then discover that Choi, the psychiatrist helping Jang, is the same person who's been connected to Sol all along. However, a dirty towel falls on Jang's face, causing him to faint. The next day, he calls his doctor, seeking reassurance about the whole love is cure concept. Choi advises him that if he wants to test his immunity to a certain person, he should use something of theirs. Jang then takes Sol's mug and decides to use it when he gets home. Later that night, when Sol returns home, she finds her father there. He tells her he got a new job cleaning cars, and to celebrate, he's cooked meat pies. He asks Sol to take some food to Choi as a thank you for all the help he provided that day. Sol agrees, takes the food to Choi, and he invites her to eat with him. During their meal, Choi suggests that since they live together and eat together often, they should be friends. He proposes that the first step to being friends is sharing a secret with each other. Sol starts by admitting that she works at a cleaning company, and if her father found out, he would be very upset. Choi then confesses that he has feelings for someone who doesn't know it, but he's been watching her for a long time. We learn that the girl he's talking about is Sol. 6 years ago, Choi worked as a construction worker, and one day, Sol gave him a box of her favorite juice, complimenting him on his hard work. Since then, he's been infatuated with her, secretly watching her from afar. Back at Jang's place, he hesitates to use Sol's mug, but ends up watching a TV show about love. While watching, he zones out and starts seeing Sol everywhere, becoming increasingly obsessed with her. One day while they're out working, Jong's colleague, Cheok, notices Dong sitting in a cafe with the girl he likes. Cheok sneaks closer, eavesdropping on their conversation, only to hear the girl say that Dong is forcing himself on her and that she doesn't love him. Hurt by her words, Cheok leaves and reflects on what he overheard. Dong later approaches Cheok, reassuring him that he isn't interested in the girl and that he didn't want Cheok to see him in such a vulnerable state. Cheok brushes it off, admitting that he knows Dong is more handsome than him. Cheok then calls in to say he won't be able to work for the rest of the day. Sol heads out for a job at a small apartment in a lower-class neighborhood. When Jong finds out that Sol is there, he panics, jumps into his car and drives to her location. Upon arriving, he bangs on the door until the owner opens it. Jong bursts in, only to find Sol safe, but he's so worked up that he grabs her and takes her away in his car. While driving, Sol notices that Yang's hand is injured. She makes him pull over and tends to his wound, but in the heat of the moment, Jong impulsively hugs her. Choi, who happens to be nearby, sees this and is deeply upset because the woman who is meant to heal his patient is the one he loves. The next morning, Sol is late to work after taking a long shower, which is unusual for her. She's dressed up, excited by the idea that Jong might have feelings for her. However, Jong avoids her at the office, embarrassed by what happened. He decides to visit his grandfather, who is sick. Despite his grandfather's harsh demeanor, Jong is determined to inherit the company from him and leave behind the cleaning business. When Jong sees his mother enter the room, he excuses himself. She follows him and confronts him, saying that he can't keep ignoring her and warning that no woman would ever love him, considering even his own mother can't stand him. Upset, Jang leaves and runs into Sol on his way out. They sit down together and Sol brings up the hug from the previous night, asking what it meant. Annoyed, Jong snaps at her, saying that if she's hoping for him to confess love or say he has feelings for her, she's mistaken. He tells her that he doesn't care about such things and storms off, leaving Sol in shock. The next day, Sol returns to work with a clear mind, having learned from her experience with Jang. She goes to him and says that she's not interested in relationships either, and doesn't care about his behavior toward her. She leaves him to his thoughts and walks away. Later, Cheok, feeling down, visits Dong with food to cheer him up and confides in him. In the process, Cheok accidentally lets it slip that Sol works at the same cleaning company as him. Dong is shocked by this news and heads straight to Sol's workplace. Sol realizes she's in trouble, so she takes Dong and Cheok to a restaurant to calm him down. She explains that she's just trying to support him and their father, especially now that times are tough. Dong reassures her that he's not angry because there's no shame in honest work, but he wishes she had told him sooner. He then shares some good news. He got accepted into a prestigious university. They head home to tell their father, who is overjoyed by the news. Dong remains silent about Sol's job. That night, Sol goes into her room and starts going through her old memory boxes. She pulls out a medal, and we learn that 6 years ago she was a champion at hurdle jumping. One day she received a call informing her that her mother was taking her last breaths and that their home had collapsed. The collapse was caused by a powerful family that owns construction companies. Just before the house fell, Sol's mother realized that Sol's medal was still inside. She entered to retrieve it and got injured. She watched her mother die before her eyes, and from that moment on, she withdrew from sports. The next day, she sees Jang leaving for an errand, looking sharp and well-groomed. We learn that his friend is volunteering at a conference for a renowned psychologist, and Sol is shocked to find out that the psychologist is Choi. She remembers seeing him at her house several times, so she calls Sol to come immediately. When Sol arrives, she's stunned to discover that Choi is a successful psychologist who gives lectures. After his session, Choi approaches her and admits he never expected to see her there. Since the truth is out, he confesses everything, telling her he's a psychologist and that the girl he has been watching and loves is her. Jong, standing a distance away, sees them talking and comes to apologize to Sol for his previous behavior. Since he knows Choi's name, he realizes that Choi is indeed the psychologist she's with, but doesn't say anything. Choi then invites Sol to dinner, explaining that he moved into the neighborhood just to be closer to her. He assures her that if she feels uncomfortable with his confession, he can keep his distance. However, he genuinely wants to grow closer to her, and Sol is taken aback by the depth of care and affection he's showing. This drives Jang insane with jealousy. He calls Choi, insisting they need to meet. When they do, Jang mentions he's seen Choi at Sol's place. Choi confirms this since he's her neighbor. They start exchanging pleasantries, and Choi admits that he loves Sol. Jang denies having feelings for her but admits that she's someone who touches him without effort. He says if he recovers from his illness, he wouldn't want to be with her because she's disorganized and not his type. But deep down, he's lying to himself. The next day, Sol needs her work uniform from home, so she calls Choi for help. He brings it to her at the office, and when Young sees them together, jealousy flares up again. One night, Sol returns home and finds Choi waiting for her. He tells her he's tried calling her numerous times, but she hasn't answered. He reveals that her father knows about her job at the cleaning company. Sol enters the house trying to calm her father, but he insists he won't allow her to lead a life like his, filled with hardships. His decision is clear. She won't go back to that job and should find another one. The following day, when Sol doesn't show up for work, Jang senses something is wrong and decides to visit her at home. He finds her, but before she can speak, her father walks in. Jang introduces himself as the head of the cleaning company where Sol works, but her father seems displeased. After learning about Sol's situation, Jang explains that their job is challenging but focused on maintaining a good reputation and ensuring customer satisfaction. He emphasizes the importance of taking care of his employees and somehow manages to convince her father about the job. As Jang leaves, he tells Sol he won't give up on her and will continue to persuade her father until she can return to work with them again. He takes her hand, hinting at his feelings, but he's still shy about admitting them. The next morning, Sol's father wakes her up, reminding her not to be late for work. She realizes that he has been swayed by Jang's perspective. Before heading to the company, Sol approaches Choi and informs him that she will be returning to work. She also mentions that she can't fall in love because she likes someone else, her boss, and she doesn't want to hurt him. Choi takes it well, saying he'd be honored to be her close friend. At the office, her coworkers welcome her back, and Jang mentions that the company was missing something during her absence. Her first assignment is at a law office, and she quickly learns that the tasks there are quite important. She finds herself cleaning an office when someone informs her that there's spilled tea in front of the elevator and asks her to clean it up. Afterward, she goes back to clear the papers on the shelf. However, as soon as she steps out, that same man takes a death sentence document and shreds it in the paper shredder. When Sol returns, she continues shredding papers but avoids the area near the desk or the documents on it. A little later, we see Jang going to the office manager, and it becomes clear that there's a huge problem. The execution document is missing. They accuse Sol of having shredded it. Jang defends Sol, claiming that if there's solid evidence, he's ready to compensate them and even file a lawsuit against them. However, upon reviewing the security footage, they find that a section of the recording is missing. After that segment, Sol appears shredding the remaining papers, but the evidence is not conclusive. Still, it's clear that Sol was involved. A lawsuit is filed against the company, and they are waiting for any evidence to support their case. Feeling guilty for everything, Sol decides to resign, gathers her things, and leaves. One day, while Sol's father is going about his business, two thugs come and attack him, demanding he vacate the premises so they can take over the car wash business. By coincidence, Sol is nearby and rushes to defend her father. She calls Doll for help. Doll arrives and confronts the thugs, leading to a scuffle that results in the police arresting them. Sol's father is terrified that his son's future might be ruined because of everything that's happened. Doll is then scheduled for a disciplinary hearing, which could lead to him being banned from sports and disqualified from an upcoming competition in a month. One day, Young asks to meet Sol, revealing that she knows about his brother's situation and can help him, but with one small condition. She wants to stay at Young's house under the pretext of being a personal cleaner since he suffers from germophobia. She claims to be the only one who can help him. Sol agrees and returns to her father to tell him she'll be moving to a new branch of the company in Busan. She prepares her things to leave, unaware that she'll actually be living in the same area as Young. Sol goes to say goodbye and packs her belongings, getting into Young's car. When they arrive at Young's house, he's shocked to see her. When Sol informs him that she's the new cleaner and will be living with him, he can hardly believe it. Jang calls Jung to confirm everything. Meanwhile, Jung's mother arrives, thinking that Sol wants to take advantage of her son, and she tries to kick Sol out. Sol insists that this is her job and that she can't leave. Jung, frustrated, storms out of the house. As soon as he leaves, Young's mother calls Young and learns that Sol is the only one who can help her son with his condition. This convinces her to let Sol stay with them. We then see Jung checking into a 5-star hotel, but after causing a disturbance, he is thrown out. The next day, Sol finds out he's been sleeping in his office, so she visits him, tells him she has repaired her relationship with his mother, and asks him to return home. He agrees, and when they get back, he suggests that his mother stay with them that night since it's late. The following day, while Sol is writing in her journal, she receives a video call from her father. Surprised, she answers and reassures them that everything is fine in Busan, although she mentions being busy with work and ends the call. Jang later sees on the news that a storm is about to hit Busan today, realizing she's lying about being away. When Sol returns to her journal, she notices it's missing just as the doorbell rings. She opens the door, feeling anxious about how messy the place is. Jang tells her to tidy up because they're having dinner together. The next day, while she's taking a shower, Jang finds her journal and reads it, discovering that she's been waiting for him to express his feelings. Encouraged, he decides to confess his love. However, the next day, Jang's grandfather requests a meeting with Sol. He knows she can heal his grandson but insists she shouldn't develop feelings for Jang, even if he confesses his love to her. In return for this request, he offers to fully support Sol's brother's education, covering all his financial needs and problems. When Sol returns home, she feels extremely upset but feels compelled to agree for her brother's future. Meanwhile, Yang is all set to confess to Sol and brings her flowers. However, before he can do so, Sol interrupts him, claiming she found her journal at his place. She tells him she doesn't love him and that they shouldn't put each other in an awkward position. Jang is devastated, insisting she's wrong, but Sol walks away. The next day, Sol finds the bouquet of flowers discarded in the trash. Jang approaches her, saying that even if she doesn't have feelings for him, he will continue pursuing her until she loves him, no matter the cost. He goes out of his way to impress her, even cooking for her, although he fails miserably. Sol feels overwhelmed by everything happening and decides to meet Young. She tells her that she isn't going anywhere and shares everything about Yang, explaining that she can't reciprocate his feelings because of his grandfather. Jang, too, seems relentless in his pursuit. At that moment, Jung runs into Jang and informs him that his therapist is at the door. He has been able to find Jang through Jung and learn that Sol is there, which is why he came looking for her. Jang tries to keep him out of the house, but Young explains that this therapist has been helping him for months and is there to conduct face-to-face sessions. When Sol walks in, Young introduces himself, explaining that he's Yang's therapist and insists that he needs to treat Jang in sessions, or he will have to take Sol with him. Jang doesn't want that to happen, and Sol tries to find a compromise, hoping to convince Choi to help him. However, Choi refuses and insists on staying in the house with them. He psychologically pressures Jang, doing everything he dislikes. He makes a mess, drinks from the fridge, and sleeps on the couch. Choi also cooks all the dishes Jang hates and gets too close at all times. At one point, he even goes to Jang's office to convince him to accept therapy. Eventually, Jang becomes fed up and agrees, but only on the condition that Choi answers one question honestly. Does he really love Sol? Choi responds that he considers it closed, insisting they are just friends now, which makes Jang very happy. When Sol returns home, she notices the change in atmosphere. Things feel normal between them. She learns that Jang has agreed to start treatment. One day, Jang takes Sol to an aquarium. She loves the ocean and they share a romantic day together. Later, Sol asks to step out and meet her friends for a bit, and she heads to a restaurant where they catch up over food. During their meal, Dong mentions that he's in a relationship and treats his girlfriend with respect. In the middle of their conversation, Dong's phone rings and he answers, thinking it's his girlfriend. However, his expression changes when he realizes it's about his grandmother, who is in critical condition. The group rushes to the hospital, where Dong reassures her and comforts her, taking care of everything. He explains to his friends that the woman they're worried about isn't his grandmother. Instead, she's the grandmother of a close friend who tragically passed away in a violent incident. Since then, Dong has taken care of her as a way to honor his friend's memory. After learning Jang's story, he offers him a job at his company, despite Jang's criminal record, feeling grateful for the kindness Jang has shown him. Once Dong's grandmother is stable, Sol walks home with Jang. When they arrive, Jang's mother is waiting for them and mentions that she has arranged for him to meet some nice girls to choose from. Jang gets angry, asserting that there's someone he loves. He takes Sol's hand and says it's her. His mother is annoyed and dismisses him, claiming he must be joking. Jang insists that his feelings are real, despite his mother's doubts, stating firmly that he will continue to love her. The next day, Zhang's mother visits Seoul, wanting to understand why Seoul has been rejecting her son. After thinking about it all night, she comes to believe that Seoul is a good person and not after Zhang's money. Seoul explains that their social classes are different, and she feels uncomfortable with the situation. The conversation feels stiff, which hints to Zhang's mother that Zhang's grandfather might be involved in the complications. She goes to confront the grandfather, expressing her disapproval of his interference in her son's life and accusing him of harming Zhang. She insists that if she can help Zhang recover, he should allow them to be together. However, Zhang's grandfather is relentless. He calls John, seeking information about Seoul. Meanwhile, Zhang's mother contacts Seoul, asking her to stay at her father's house for a while as she plans something to help her son. Seoul heads to her father's house, bringing gifts, but the only one who realizes she's putting on an act is her father. That night, when Zhang returns home, he is shocked to find his house full of young people throwing a party, which is a method of shock therapy his mother thought would help Zhang. Feeling overwhelmed, Zhang tries to escape but struggles with his symptoms and attempts to call Seoul. When she answers, he is unable to speak and loses consciousness. Seoul and Choi rush to his house and discover the party, quickly figuring out what happened. They search for Zhang and find him unconscious. They move him to his bed to rest. Meanwhile, John has been investigating Seoul's past and uncovers a tragic detail. Seoul's mother died due to a corruption issue caused by Zhang's grandfather's company. The following day, Zhang wakes up and his first thought is of Seoul. When he sees her, he rushes over and hugs her, expressing his fear and asking her not to leave him again. Seoul reassures him, saying she loves him too and won't distance herself again. They share a warm moment over breakfast, and Zhang playfully asks her to feed him. At that moment, we see Choi talking with John, questioning whether Zhang's grandfather knows that Seoul's mother died in the accident his company caused. John replies that he hasn't told him, and if he did, it would hurt both Seoul and Zhang. Back with Seoul, she dresses up and prepares to visit her mother's grave. Zhang notices and expresses his desire to accompany her. They set off together, but on the way, a small child unexpectedly crosses their path, causing Zhang to swerve and crash his car. With the car disabled, they are forced to take public transport, which is a first for them, and neither feels comfortable. When they board the bus, a group of older women gets on and starts flirting with Zhang, which makes Seoul uncomfortable. Eventually, they arrive at their destination, and Zhang greets Seoul's mother's grave, introducing himself as her daughter's boyfriend. He steps aside to let Seoul speak with her mother privately. Seoul sits by the grave, crying as she confesses her struggle to choose between her true love and her brother's future. The decision weighs heavily on her heart. After sharing her feelings, she returns to Zhang and asks about the reason behind his strained relationship with his mother. Zhang explains that he grew up without knowing his father because his mother was in love with someone else when she got pregnant, and his grandfather disapproved of their marriage. Zhang has managed to keep his father out of their lives ever since, and he hasn't known him since then. His mother didn't care for him much and focused on her own life, leaving him in the care of his grandfather, who often abused him. She also got involved with many men, the last one being the one she is currently with. However, during this period, she begins to show some concern for Zhang. After a long night of contemplation, she comes to a decision. The next day, Seoul approaches John, informing her that she plans to resign from her job. She feels she can no longer use Zhang to benefit her brother. She shares what happened with Zhang's grandfather, who asked her not to reciprocate Zhang's feelings to secure her brother's future. After their conversation, she leaves and returns to Zhang's place to gather her things. She tells him that she can no longer stay with him and wants to start fresh, but she needs to go back to her home to take care of a few things. Once back home, Seoul informs her father about her decision to quit her job in order to focus on helping her brother. The following day, Zhang is at the office and overhears a conversation about Seoul's brother, who is in trouble and needs witnesses to defend him. Zhang quickly decides to go to where Seoul is. When he arrives, he finds her and her colleagues handing out flowers and flyers to raise awareness about the issue and gather support. Despite their efforts, no one is willing to help or testify for Seoul's brother. Seoul thanks her colleagues for their support. Once they leave, she hugs Yang and expresses her gratitude for all his efforts. As they walk her home, Seoul receives a call from Joe, who informs her that they have obtained footage from a surveillance camera that could prove her brother's innocence. Excited, they rush to her house, where the atmosphere is jubilant. However, Seoul's father is shocked when he sees Yang's face turn serious, especially when Zhang asks for his blessing to date Seoul. He also joins them for dinner but finds it uncomfortable due to their behavior. After the dinner, Seol walks Jang to the end of the street before returning home. The next day, Seol visits Jang's mother, excitedly announcing that she is dating her son. Embarrassed, she quickly leaves, but Jang's mother is overjoyed. Meanwhile, Jang confesses to John that he loves Seol and shares the news with his colleagues, who can hardly believe it but are thrilled for them. Their love has begun to blossom, and the next morning Seol wakes up and decides to clean her room, which she hasn't done in years. Her family is taken aback by her newfound motivation. Jang, determined to mend the rift with his mother, visits her at her clothing shop and is kind to her. One day, while they're together, they spot a movie that Jang's mother loves, which is being shown in theaters. Although she wants to attend, she worries that he won't be able to due to his condition. However, Jang insists on going with her, and the next day they head to the cinema. Jang secretly coordinates with his team at work to clean the entire theater, and when Seol walks into the screening room, she finds it completely empty, preparing for a special surprise. While watching the movie together, Seol expresses her joy to Jang about finally getting to see it, but she insists he didn't need to go through so much trouble for her. She jokes that if she hadn't realized the empty theater was filled with her colleagues, it would have felt foolish. The following day, Jang calls her to say he wants to continue his treatment and heal, so he can be with her and allow her to live the life she dreams of. Meanwhile, John visits Jang's grandfather and confronts him about his actions. She expresses her disapproval of his behavior, stating that she doesn't want to assist him in anything that harms Jang because she feels it betrays the trust they had. However, Jang's grandfather reacts angrily, telling her to focus on Seol's brother's court case, threatening her for speaking out. John requests to be left alone, informing him that she has quit the company, but he dismisses her words, claiming he doesn't need her help since he knows everything about Seol's situation, including that her mother died because of him. John then meets Choi, who informs her that Jang's grandfather will not let her go easily. So she goes to Jang's grandfather's house and introduces herself as Jang's psychologist, claiming she knows all about him and his troubles. She reveals that he is responsible for Seol's mother's death and warns him to leave Seol alone. Otherwise, she will disclose his health issues. It turns out that Jang's grandfather is suffering from cancer, and such news could have significant repercussions for his company. He takes her words as a threat. On the day of the court ruling for Seol's brother, unexpectedly, he receives a 1-year suspension from competitions, causing him to miss his chance to join the national team. As he leaves the courtroom, he overhears people talking about his punishment despite the evidence supporting his case, all because Seol is dating the heir of the AJ company. Furious, he storms home and ignores Seol when she questions him about the ruling. When she learns from her father that her brother was suspended due to her relationship with an AJ heir, Seol is shocked since she was unaware of his family background. Feeling overwhelmed, Seol approaches Jang and tells him they need to break up because she can't be with him anymore. This plunges her into a state of depression as she recalls Jang's grandfather's indifference when she last saw him after her mother's death. Jang, meanwhile, tries to support Seol through this difficult time, but he also wants to confront his grandfather for ruining his dreams. When Jang goes to the company, he demands to see his grandfather, blaming him for his year-long suspension and for robbing him of his future in sports. He tells his grandfather that he lacks compassion for destroying a young man's dreams, just to pressure him into inheriting the company. He emphasizes that he will not let Seol go, regardless of the circumstances. However, his grandfather retorts that Seol will see him as a murderer because of the past accident that killed her mother 6 years ago. This revelation shatters Jang, driving him into a deep depression, making him unable to care for himself, and even leading him to self-harm due to his obsessive hand-washing. One day, Jang's grandfather tries to visit the company, but he is met with hostility. Jang confronts him, stating that this place was built on the blood of others. However, his grandfather shocks him by revealing that Jang actually owns over 50% of the cleaning company he thinks he built through hard work. Confused, Jang struggles to understand, but his grandfather continues, explaining that he invested in the company when no one else would, implying that Jang doesn't truly own anything. Throughout this turmoil, John is aware of the entire situation, but has not shared this information with Jang. When Jang leaves, he feels lost and overwhelmed, ultimately getting into a serious accident. Upon hearing the news, Seol rushes to the hospital where she encounters Jang's grandfather. She tells him she is not there for him but for Jang, blaming him for all the misfortunes in their lives. Afterward, she finds Jang's mother in distress, vowing that if anything happens to her son, she will never forgive Zhang's grandfather. A week later, Zhang awakens to find his mother by his side, and they share a joyful reunion. He expresses a desire to see Sol, but Zhang tries to calm him down, revealing that she plans to resign from the company and asks for his forgiveness. Zhang, feeling betrayed, tells her that he had trusted her. Right now, Zhang doesn't know Sol anymore, and he decides not to return to the company. He plans to travel to America, leaving everything behind, and asks her to leave. He learns from his mother that Sol visited him every day while he was unconscious, deeply worried about him. At the same time, Sol is on her way to see him again, but overhears that he has awakened from his coma, so she decides not to go. Zhang waits for Sol to visit, but she doesn't show up. Later, he is at the courthouse trying to find a solution for Sol's brother, and unexpectedly he runs into Sol there. They sit together and he reassures her, bringing up their relationship and expressing his desire for them to get back together. However, Sol tells him that it's not possible and extends her hand for a proper goodbye, but he doesn't reciprocate. Sol leaves feeling upset, knowing she hurt him without meaning to. The next day, Zhang goes to collect his belongings from the company and encounters John there. She tells him she wants to clarify something before leaving. She had been in America attending lectures on germ phobia because her son has the same condition. There, she met Zhang's grandfather, who was also seeking solutions for his illness. As she leaves, Zhang feels conflicted about his grandfather. When Zhang is about to leave, his team calls out to him, upset that he's leaving them. He reassures them that they'll meet again and expresses his happiness working with them before departing. He then visits Zhang's grandfather to check on him. The grandfather admits he feels ashamed and won't do anything harmful to Zhang because of his conscience. Zhang questions why he defends his reputation so fiercely, especially knowing the truth about Sol's mother's death. Zhang reveals that he was part of the team during the accident and has felt guilty ever since, deciding he must support Sol and her family. He urges his grandfather to apologize for what he did, believing it's the only way to compensate for their loss. Surprisingly, Zhang's grandfather actually visits Sol's family, appearing weary. Sol's father offers him water and tells him that no amount of compensation will suffice for their loss. He asks him to leave, affirming that they have had enough. Later, Yang's grandfather expresses to Sol that he can't find the words to convey his regret, acknowledging that she's right about everything. He admits he deserves to face any consequences for the harm he caused. He confesses his love for her but tells her he is at the airport ready to fly to America, urging her to come if she wants to forgive him. Sol rushes to the airport, but by the time she arrives, it's too late. Yang has already left. In a press conference, Zhang's grandfather admits to being responsible for the accident 6 years ago, relinquishing control of the company and donating it to the community as a form of atonement. 2 years later, we see a beggar at the airport, reeking of alcohol and holding a beer bottle. Someone approaches and takes the bottle from him, revealing himself to be Yang, who has recovered from his illness and is now kind and pleasant. Meanwhile, Sol has started working at an advertising company, and her life is improving. One day, as she returns home, it begins to snow and she slips. Zhang appears just in time to catch her, leaving her shocked. They decide to sit together at a cafe where she notices he is behaving like a normal person now. He explains that he traveled to seek treatment and brings up the possibility of rekindling their relationship. Sol, however, firmly rejects him and leaves. The next day, Zhang visits his mother, who is delighted that he has overcome his phobia. He is sweet with her, apologizing for everything he put her through and congratulating her on her new marriage. Zhang then goes to his grandfather's house, where he meets a young boy and learns he is John's son. They talk, and Zhang finds out that John has been visiting his grandfather, as his health has deteriorated, and he spends most of his time alone. When he sees his grandfather, he is overjoyed and says he thought he would never see him again. Zhang couldn't believe he had left him alone for so long. He tells him that he forgives him for stepping away from the company and for trying to make amends for his mistakes. We learn that Duel has returned to Taekwondo and is now part of the national team for Korea, achieving his dream without giving up. One morning, Zhang wakes up to find Choi sitting in his house. We discover that while Zhang was in America, they had been in touch and became very close friends. Meanwhile, Sheikh has left the company and is now working as a Taekwondo coach, just like his friend Duel. Dong visits Zhang, and it's been a long time since they last saw each other. They all gather at a restaurant, and a famous actor joins them. To their surprise, he greets them and sits down to eat and drink together. He pulls out some papers outlining plans to start a new cleaning company, which he aims to build with his own efforts. Sheikh agrees to join him, as does Dong, but Jae is unsure because of his newfound fame. He offers to promote their business, given his popularity. John enters and expresses her desire to join them as well, and they welcome her back as an assistant, forgiving her. They go ahead and purchase an office for their new company and start preparing it together. Meanwhile, Seol's father takes his children to visit their mother and is visibly moved. He requests to speak with her privately and recounts everything that happened, explaining that those responsible for her death have apologized and made amends. He asks for her blessing for Seol's love for Jong. He then talks to Seol, telling her she can now approach Jong because he has forgiven her and her mother has no objections. Seol tries to hide her feelings, but her brother confirms their father's words, noting that the sadness in her eyes is evident. However, things have changed, and they were able to forgive him, knowing he was not at fault. Seol visits Jong at the new company, and the moment she sees him, she hugs him tightly, confessing that she still loves him and wants to start over. They reunite, and the new company is officially launched, marking a fresh start for their story together. And with that, our series comes to an end. See you in the next recap. Goodbye.